It's a Friday, and by my math, that means it's time for me to be talking about something on the vault. And I realized I don't think I've ever spoken about this at length, but there's a really, really cool website. If you have any interest in the law, it's called Famous Trials. Famous Trials. And I've known about the website for a long time, and anytime I want to get a quick synopsis of a trial, I go to the Famous Trials website because this guy's website is quite good and authoritative. And it's a great way to learn about something is without going book length on it. You know what I'm saying? So the website's run by Douglas O. Linder. Douglas O. Linder. He's an American author, narrator, and historian. He started the website back in 1995, Famous Trials. I'll put a link to it in the description below the video. And according to Wikipedia, it covers over 50 famous trials throughout history. Here's the thing. It's I think substantially more than that, but also don't think just American trials, just trials throughout history. He covers them. He's written a couple books. He's a graduate, though, of Stanford Law School, and he knows what he's talking about. So, for instance, he's been interviewed on CNN about the legacy of the Scopes trial, and he also gave a lecture talking about the movie The Last Duel. And, of course, he was talking about The Last Duel in 1386. There's a movie about it recently. And it was an actual judicial duel, meaning that the legal authorities sanctioned it and said, yes, you guys duel. The winner is right. The loser is wrong. So a very, very harsh way to go. So go to the Famous Trials website if you're interested. And he has trials going back as far as the trial of Socrates, trial of Jesus, trial of Gilles de Rais, probably mispronouncing that. Martin Luther, you've heard that name, I'm sure. And then some you may not have heard of, but here's the Boston Massacre, the Burr Conspiracy trial, the John Brown trial, Susan B. Anthony trial, the Haymarket trial, 3 trials of Oscar Wilde, Big Bill Haywood trial, which I talk about occasionally when I'm talking about the time around the Italian Hall disaster, because Big Bill Haywood was a union organizer. Leo Frank, the Scopes monkey trial, of course, as mentioned earlier. The Hauptmann trial, which is the Lindbergh baby kidnapping case. Korematsu trial, the Tokyo war crimes trial, and so on. And so there's all these trials, and each and every one of them is done very, very well. And pretty much any trial you can think of that is a famous trial, there's a good chance he's covered it. The Enron case of Lay and Skilling, there you go, 2006. The trial of Amanda Knox, 2009. And so it's an amazing resource. But I also find that if you're interested in it, the topic of famous trials, it's accessible, meaning it's not written as if it's written by a legal scholar for other legal scholars. No. It's written so you can understand this stuff in plain English, and I find it fascinating. And a lot of these trials are the kind of things that you go, oh, that's right, I forgot about that case, or I heard about that case, but you didn't actually study the trial. So in the Al Capone trial, which I just read recently, he talks about some things that you would have seen in the movie if you watched the movie The Untouchables. But it's, again, Hollywood does what they do to stories. And so he explains it exactly how it happened, what the key pieces of testimony were, what the judge did, things of that nature, and goes through it quite well. So I've always enjoyed that website. In fact, I know I referred to it a few times in my book on American murder houses, because some of those murders resulted in trials, and some of those trials were, in fact, famous trials. And so he would cover them there. And so it's a great starting point if you want to learn about something. And, of course, I've read books on many of these trials. I've read books on the Lindbergh baby kidnapping trial, for instance, with Hauptmann. And there's a few others, the Leo Frank case I've read about, and I've read entire books on them. But sometimes a story is fascinating enough to say I want to sit down and spend 20 minutes and read about the trial, but I don't want to actually go to the library or order a book and pay for a book and then read an entire book on it. There you go. But of course, if you enjoy the version of it that's on the Famous Trials website, then of course you can go, oh, I want to learn more, and go read the book. And I'll tell you right now, because I've had some people want to argue with how accurate things are on the internet. And I'm going to let you know right now that from my own research, having read several books, entire books written about some of these trials, his synopsis is, whatever the plural of synopsis is, synopsis is, synopse, it's probably Latin, synopsi, whatever. His synopsis work is extremely accurate. And I never found anything in any of his versions to go, ooh, that's wrong. And trust me, and stuff like this that I'm really deeply interested in, I do go over things with a fine-tooth comb. I do. And so the website is amazing. And I know some people are going to go, Steve, I'm not really into famous trials, don't really care. That's fine. It's not for everybody. But it will be for many people who are just poking around in history and reading stuff, and somebody mentions a situation like the Scottsboro boys. And you go, what happened there? And you go look it up. And, of course, there's the Al Capone trial of 1931. Leopold and Loeb is another one, famous one, 1924. Sacco and Vanzetti, I've read an entire book on that. Likewise, the synopsis here is absolutely spot on. The Triangle Fire Trial. The Triangle Shirtwaist Fire was in New York. It was a tragedy where a fire broke out inside a building where primarily women were working sewing material for shirts. And because of the fact that the owners were a little worried about the workers sneaking out and taking breaks and stuff, they had locked a bunch of the doors shut. And so when a fire broke out and swept through the area, people couldn't get out of the building safely. And a lot of people died. And so there's a trial about that. I mentioned Big Bill Haywood before. I've also read his book, The Lizzie Borden Trial. And I'm going to mention that one specifically because I wrote a book about American murder houses. And one of the houses I feature is the Lizzie Borden house. And I've had people argue with me about the facts of that case. And interestingly, there is a lot of speculation out there about things that happened in that case. But if you look at the trial that took place and talk about what exactly happened at the trial, you can't argue with that about what happened at the trial. You can argue about whether or not she was really guilty because she was found not guilty at trial. But that, for some odd reason, is a story that a lot of people really get bent out of shape about. And the Haymarket trial is another one. I've read a full book on that. And there's a situation there where they did wind up convicting and executing some people who, it's a little unclear as exactly how guilty they may have been, but at the time, it was kind of difficult to be an anarchist and be put on trial and say, well, I am an anarchist, but I'm not the one who did that thing in the Haymarket. So that's another one that's quite controversial. And then, of course, the Lincoln conspiracy trial I've got to mention because I did a video years ago about conspiracies and about how conspiracy theory became a way to label somebody or an idea as crazy. Oh, that person's crazy. They believe in conspiracies. And I understand what they're getting at, but I've always felt bad they use that label because there actually are things in life that are conspiracies. And so the Lincoln conspiracy, we all know who shot Lincoln, right? And people go, yeah, that was, Booth. Booth did it. So that's not a conspiracy. Oh, it turns out there was a conspiracy, though. He was working in conjunction with other people. And for example, there were some other high-ranking government officials who were attacked that night, but the attackers weren't successful. And there were other people involved in the planning and so on. And they wound up putting on trial, I believe, 10 more people, 9 or 10 more people. And one guy escaped and fled to the Vatican, believe it or not. But the point is that if you want to read about the trial and what's led up to it and then what happened at trial and so on, it's all on this website, Famous Trials. So I highly recommend. It's one of my favorite websites on the internet. I'm surprised they haven't talked about it before, but I mentioned earlier that Wikipedia says more than 50 trials. The subhead now says Famous Trials, accounts and materials for 100 of history's most important trials. And it's also broken up, if you want to study it, they've got free speech trials, murder trials, race trials, religion trials, war, corruption, or politics trials, and then wrongful convictions. And so you can look this up by category if you want to just see the wrongful convictions. And I know there are people out there who are interested in some of these categories or the free speech trials. And so that's the kind of thing that will appeal to a lot of people as well. So like I said, one of my favorite websites, I'm surprised I haven't talked about it more here, but of things, you talk about like what was the internet invented for? Like what websites are out there that really show like what the internet can do. And one of them to me is Famous Trials by Douglas Linder. I'll put a link below. Check it out. Otherwise, I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.